Welcome to this new podcast, Netaji's World, Our World, The Long View. Now, why are we doing this podcast at a time such as this, and what are the lessons that we can draw from what Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose did in his time and through his actions that are relevant in the modern day context at a time when we are seeing, pressures, whether it is on strategic autonomy, whether it is on economic growth, whether it is on security affairs in the near neighbourhood. What is it that India can learn from the strategic imagination that was used by Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose at a different time, competing amongst imperial powers, building social coalitions, and ultimately having the long view, which is why this podcast is called The Long View, which is a strategic dimension. So that's why we have launched this new podcast. It is going to be helmed by the Chanakya University. And I have the pleasure of speaking today with the chair, the Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Chair at the Chanakya University, Ambassador Ashok Kantha.
His objective was not just limited to getting the British out of India. His objective was to project and promote India as a rule shaper and not just a rule follower. In some way, he was doing what we have done subsequently. Call it non-alignment, call it multi-alignment. What is India's interest? Who do you work with to promote those interests? That's what he tried to do.
Welcome to this new podcast, Netaji's World, Our World, The Long View. Now, why are we doing this podcast at a time such as this, and what are the lessons that we can draw from what Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose did in his time and through his actions that are relevant in the modern day context at a time when we are seeing, pressures, whether it is on strategic autonomy, whether it is on economic growth, whether it is on security affairs in the near neighbourhood. What is it that India can learn from the strategic imagination that was used by Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose at a different time, competing amongst imperial powers, building social coalitions, and ultimately having the long view, which is why this podcast is called The Long View, which is a strategic dimension. So that's why we have launched this new podcast. It is going to be helmed by the Chanakya University. And I have the pleasure of speaking today with the chair, the Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Chair at the Chanakya University, Ambassador Ashok Kantha.
Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome to this new podcast, The Long View, Netaji's World, Our World. My name is Zakka Jacob. We're trying to understand Netaji's legacy, the life he lived, his contributions, and how that relates to the modern day world, the geopolitical challenges that India is currently facing, and how to navigate and find space for India's foreign policy. What can we draw from Netaji's life and his times? I'm very privileged and pleased to be welcoming on this very first podcast, this first episode of The Long View, Ambassador Ashok Kantha. He's a former Indian ambassador to China and also currently the Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose Chair at the Chanakya University. Thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. So we're launching this podcast on the birth anniversary of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. Tell us why have you chosen this day and this moment, and what is it that we can learn from Netaji's legacy that is relevant in the modern context and in the modern day?
Thank you, Jaka, for hosting first episode of The Long View, this new podcast series we are starting. As you mentioned, I'm at present Subhas Chandra Bose Chair, Professor of International Relations. Idea behind this chair has been to look at India's role in Asia and more specifically a neighbourhood. There are people who talk that in Rise of India, we are made for bigger things and we can transcend our neighbourhood. I believe that's a fallacious thinking. We need to anchor Rise of India in our immediate periphery, countries which are part of India's past, India's present, and they'll be part of India's future. We'll not be growing alone, we'll be growing along with them. Uh, so, how to understand dynamics, how to come up with policy relevant recommendations on what I described in a recent lecture hosted by Chanakya University as Neighbourhood First 2.0, reimagining our neighbourhood policy. So that's going to be one preoccupation. And second will be our larger extended neighbourhood, which again, if you look at India's role in the world, it's going to be absolutely pivotal for us. So in terms of geographical priorities, that's what we are going to focus on. Now, coming to Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, we have a personality who is widely regarded as charismatic, one who never accepted passivity. He was imprisoned, escaped, didn't hide anywhere. Instead of that, you know what he did? What he did, he found agency in a very difficult, fractured, challenging world. He saw contradictions among imperial powers, and he felt that taking a strategic view, I think that's second point. First is agency, second is strategic view. He felt that a role can be carved out for India. His objective was not just limited to getting the British out of India. His objective was to project and promote India as a rule shaper and not just a rule follower. Now, this was a very ambitious dream at that point of time, especially someone who was escaping from
prison.
detention. He made certain choices. Some of those choices people can say were controversial, but he never had any illusions about those countries. In some way, he was doing what we have done subsequently. Call it non-alignment, call it multi-alignment. What is India's interest? Who do you work with to promote those interests? That's what he tried to do. And we can come to that later. My argument, an argument of a lot of historians, like Professor Bipin Chandra, someone I studied as a student history long time ago, is that Aine might have lost the war in Rangoon, but the afterlife of Aine, the afterlife of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose is very powerful. And it shaped not only the trajectory of freedom struggle in a very significant manner, but it continued to inspire us to date.
So in those final few years, those momentous events, the raising of a standing army in the INA, the Red Fort trials that happened, and then the naval revolt, how did this shape the final few years of India's freedom struggle? And do you believe that, it sort of hastened the exit of the British?
Yes, I think what you're saying is absolutely correct. Let's begin with the raising of Azad Hind Fauj. These were people from British Army, British Indian Army. British authorities were quite shocked that such a large number of personnel of British Indian Army or British Army, they're deserting and they are accepting leadership of Indian civilian, in fact. He was a civilian at that point of time. And kind of army he forged was very unique. It was very secular, it was cosmopolitan, truly, multi-hued army. They put up strong resistance. Odds were against them. Odds turned against Japan also. Eventually, they might have lost on the Burma front. But it resonated very strongly at that point of time that here we have, Indians who are standing up to mighty British Empire. You'll recall that when Mahatma Gandhi never joined British war efforts, Quit India movement was launched in 1942. So in some way, in fact, they might have taken different roads, but both were opposing, any kind of collaboration or partnership with the British at that point of time. If we move ahead, you referred to, Red Fort trial. It was something quite amazing. You had a situation where a number of leaders of Indian National Army were being tried for treason. And you had people like Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and several leaders of Indian National Congress, despite the reservations about Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose and his different approach, non-violent approach, different from non-violent policy of Mahatma Gandhi. They joined the trial in defense of INA. After long years, in fact, Nehru put on lawyer's robe once again. He assisted Bhulabhai Desai and other senior lawyers, despite his stature. Now, this had a truly, a powerful impact on national sentiments. It resonated across the nation. There were demonstrations, strikes, and general sort of uprising in support of INA, which led to British authorities deciding they can't really imprison these people, so they had to commute a sentence. Move ahead. You referred to third very important incident. In February 1946, a few months after INA trials in the Red Fort, there was this revolt of Royal Indian Naval Ratings in Bombay, Karachi, and other places. And this was very widespread. And at a time when political system was completely fractured, already it was very clear that we are moving towards partition. They put up United Front. There were flags of Indian National Congress, Muslim League, Communists. They all raised together just to make this point that we are united. And it's a revolt against British Empire. Revolt was dealt with. But Britishers came to the conclusion that one, they have lost the psychological edge that they had. Two, the mainstay of British power was actually Indian Army.
Correct.
They were Indians. They had not come from Britain. So they have started questioning. And once they question, very difficult for them to continue in India. Thirdly, it's sometimes compared to SALT movement of Mahatma Gandhi. That gave a moral jolt to the British Empire. This one gave a psychological jolt to the British Empire. So what you said is correct. This fast-tracked the process of Britishers leaving India. Of course, mass movement was the mainstay, but this gave a fillip.
So let's now come to the contemporary world. You talked earlier about, India's policy being non-aligned or multi-aligned. These days we call it strategic autonomy. In the year gone by, 2025, I guess the strategic autonomy has faced a lot of pressure, a lot of pulls from different, great powers and the competition that's going on between them. When you look back at 2025, what are the things that you were most surprised by?
If you look back at 2025, I think it's very important to bear in mind that without doubt, Donald Trump in his second term has been a highly disruptive factor. He has made a big impact globally. He has managed to capture mind space of people across the world. But in many ways, he's not an outlier. He's not an aberration. I think this point we need to understand.
Can you explain?
I'll just explain. There were trends in the Western world, and more specifically here in USA, which were evident. And these trends included, a kind of populism, anti-immigrant sentiments, and most importantly, this feeling that why are we, defending these faraway places and paying with our blood and treasure. So an inward lurch in U.S. foreign policy, move away from globalist agenda, which was there. Trump accelerated that process. He accelerated it, and he also did things which surprised people, though it shouldn't really have surprised because he had talked about tariffs in his campaign. It was something one should have anticipated, but mostly people didn't anticipate that it will be such, targeting will be so wide. People thought he'll target US, China, he'll target some country, one limited number of countries. He started waging a tariff war in the world.
Correct.
So that became a bit of a surprise. And then how quickly, he sort of reoriented US foreign policy. For last decade and plus, US foreign policy has been predicated on this assumption that Indo-Pacific is our primary theater. Yeah. And this is something which is reflected in various national security strategies, including one, Trump himself, his first term, like 2017, on Biden's national security strategy of 2022. He moved away from that. He moved away, in fact, well before the new national security strategy was announced last month.
Correct.
In practice, he had started moving away, but now he has formalized it. He has formalized it. The primary preoccupation is Western Hemisphere. Yeah. And only secondary focus will be on the Pacific. It's a big change. Second, big change is that, we are not going to look after security interests of our allies gratis. Yeah. Also made it very clear to NATO, to Japan, to Korea, not only burden sharing, increasingly you take charge of your security. You're not going to do that. So NATO forced them 5% of GDP. Japan. These are changes which have long-term implications. Thirdly, how he reassessed China. China has been seen at least since 2017, in fact. Turning point was first Trump administration. That China is our strategic adversary. It's a systemic challenge for us, which we need to deal with. He has stopped talking in those terms. He's talking about China as the economic competitor. He's talking about, not letting one country dominate Indo-Pacific. So we must oppose, Chinese hegemony, as they put it. Fourth, which is equally important, they moved away from the policy of dual containment. Dual containment, one side of China, other side of Russia. Yeah. So he has reoriented policy towards both major powers. And finally, from our point of view, there's a big change in policy towards India. We had become a little complacent that upward trajectory with some hiccups occasionally in India-US relations will continue. I think Trump presidency has been a wake-up call. What he has done in terms of tariffs, what he has done in terms of Pakistan, Russia, in terms of what I call strategic slights meted out to India. My argument is that even if a trade deal is done soon, Sergio Gore mentioned that we are moving in that direction. It will be a serious mistake on our part not to take on board lessons of last few months. I think in many ways, India-US relations will have to be reassessed, very fundamentally recalibrated. I'm not saying we move away. USA will remain an essential partner. But what's happening that America's engagement with all major allies and partners is being recalibrated. A new equilibrium will be reached, whether it's with NATO or Japan or Korea or with India. So we have to prepare for that. And this is not going to change. It's not that, post-Trump world, it will change. Or likewise, we can discuss China later. Post-Xi world, as in when it happens, it will change. Because there are certain fundamental changes taking place which are driven by forces which will persist. So we shouldn't make the mistake of looking at these challenges as episodic or as aberration, because these challenges will persist. So we need to take a long view of these challenges. That's why we call our podcast
the long view. So on the long view on this, so for the last 20, 25 years, ever since India and the US have had this strategic partnership from the turn of the decade, from turn of the millennium actually, there was a strategic logic that underpinned this relationship, which is that the only sort of power that can, reasonably hope to compete, maybe even transcend the United States, is China. And for America to take on China, it needs friends and partners in this region. And India is probably one of the most important because in terms of size and scale, India is the one country that, so it's better to have India in America's corner rather than, in a neutral corner. Has that logic now completely been thrown out the window by Trump?
That logic is being revisited. I will not say that it has been completely thrown out the window. It's being revisited because, as I mentioned earlier, Trump 2.0 looks at China very differently compared to Trump 1.0 or Biden administration. They're not looking at China as systemic challenge the way it was done earlier. So need for them to have a strategic counterpoise to China is reduced. And if you look at signals which are coming from Washington, D.C. over the last several months, it's very clear that our earlier assumption that given strategic significance of India in US-China strategic rivalry, somehow we are in a comfortable place that we will not face the heat, even while others are subjected to that. I think that assumption has been wrong. And I suspect good old days, if we can call them good old days, are not likely to come back. So we have to get used to a changed world because in many respects, US policies are shifting. They have been shifting for some time, but then you reach a point which is a kind of tipping point. So the tipping point was reached over last few months. So the
2020.
changes became very prominent, very obvious. So we have to, deal with the USA differently. In fact, in all our strategic partnerships, people like me argue that the litmus test should be how these partnerships help in building our capabilities, whether it be economic, military, technological, diplomatic. So that should be litmus test, number one. Number two, even earlier, we were a little sort of wary of overemphasizing external balancing of China. External balancing is relevant because of the capability gap which is there between India and China. But that needs to be reassessed in more conservative terms now. Because even earlier it was very unlikely that USA will step in directly, and we didn't want them to step in an India-China, conflict situation, nor were we likely to step in directly in a conflict in Indo-Pacific, for that matter. So, very carefully reassessing expectations from each other and emphasizing the point that finally we need to build up our own capabilities even vis-a-vis China. What we need is asymmetric deterrence predicated on our own capabilities rather than expecting somebody else to sort of help us out.
Let's talk about India and China. So 5 years ago, we had this conflict in Galwan that sort of en passe continued for a number of years. And finally, in Kazan, when the two leaders met, they sort of arrived at a formulation whereby they will have disengagement, de-escalation, and finally de-induction of the troops. We are still in that process. Some parts of that process have been completed. How do you look at the current state of bilateral ties between India and China? Are the structural issues still there, or how do you view it?
Zakka, apart from looking at what comes out in official Chinese pronouncements or in their strategic literature, we also had the opportunity of engaging in dialogue, track 2, track 1.5, with our Chinese colleagues quite a bit. And a few things come out very clearly from those discussions. One, that while India-China borders are more stable today, no doubt about it, after disengagement was worked out, our borders are not normal. I'm saying that because in terms of deployment of troops, situation hasn't changed. There has been no de-escalation. In fact, talks on de-escalation have not yet commenced. De-induction is unlikely because I'm saying unlikely because I don't think our military leadership or political leadership will take that chance. Because, I'm not going into details, but in terms of reinduction capability, Chinese are much better off.
So the troops who are there will...
Troops can pull back further so that, risk factor is brought down, but we'll have to be on our guard. So nature of border has changed. It has become live, contrary to what was the case earlier. We are likely to go back to earlier situation. This is one big change. Second, you referred to structural problems. We haven't seen any indication whatsoever that Chinese are inclined to address those concerns. First structural problem, border. And their recipe is clear. De-link. Progress in other areas from border issue. Whereas we have argued, and for very good reasons, that any progress towards normalization relations is predicated on India-China borders remaining peaceful.
Yeah.
If that hasn't happened, that whole process will collapse. Chinese don't accept that linkage. On LAC clarification or boundary settlement, absolutely no appetite on part of China. Same is true of a whole lot of other structural problems like imbalance we have in trade, or the fact that kind of dependencies which have built up, which is very serious because Chinese are increasingly prone to weaponize dependencies. We saw that recently in their own negotiations with USA. One of the main reasons Mr. Trump had to blink was rare earth magnets. But that tool weapon was deployed against us also. It was deployed in many other areas, tunnel boring machines, withdrawal of their personnel from Foxconn facilities. So that issue remains. Their behavior in our neighborhood, again, they're good at reminding us from time to time that don't be too smug. So we saw what happened during Operation Sindoor. Operation Sindoor, nature of China-Pakistan collaboration was fundamentally different from what had happened in earlier, India-Pakistan conflicts in 1965, in 1971, in 1999. This time, there was operational collaboration which can be described as battlefield collusion, and that was May. This is several months after Kazan happened. As if that wasn't enough, within 2 months of Kazan, they announced the largest hydropower project on planet. And the work started a few months later. This will be in Medoc County of Tibet, just about 40 kilometers from India-China borders, 3 times the size of Three Gorges project, which is presently the largest, without consulting us, without informing us. And there are very serious implications for us. One more, if I could just add one more. They keep reminding us on their claims on what they call South Tibet, Changnan. You saw recently what happened in Shanghai. The lady, her only sin was that she was born in Arunachal Pradesh. The way she was detained. It's not just detention. As a former boundary negotiator, I have never been in any doubt that Chinese claims in Arunachal Pradesh are very serious. They should not be dismissed just as negotiating ploy. They are insistent on at least Tawang being handed over to them. Now, clearly that's not possible. So what I'm saying that what is happening today is tactical in nature and fundamental trajectory of India-China relations, while there is greater stability, which is a welcome change, but I don't see any progress towards a reset in ties anytime soon. So we have to be patient.
So what does this mean in the context of our near neighborhood? You just mentioned about Operation Sindoor and how there was real-time collusion between Pakistan and China. We're seeing what is happening in Bangladesh. So it's clear that the Chinese are using some of these inimical forces to try and hem India in. Earlier, we could at least, have the resort of saying, okay, the Americans are on our side. But now even that, is not something that we can turn back to. So how does India sort of manage the near neighborhood? Are we also looking at a situation where India needs to now engage more with some of these forces in Bangladesh, in Nepal, in Pakistan even?
I think you made a very good point that early assumption that Americans will be in our corner somehow, that is a little debatable. There's another point which I would like to highlight before I come to neighborhood. When we talked to my Chinese colleagues. They convey two messages. One message is that in the game of escalation dominance with USA, we have come ahead. And there is confidence bordering on hubris. So mindset changed. And it's a very dramatic change compared to what we saw late last year. By middle of this year, it had changed. Another message we get is that, you are coming to us seeking better relations today because you are under pressure from Washington, D.C., because your relations are under stress. So they see India coming from a position of weakness. And as a former negotiator, I can tell you that's the worst position to be in, because China respects strength. If they see vulnerability on our part, they will not sort of take on board your concerns, including in the neighborhood. So what we are witnessing, and this is not new. I mean, this has been what has happened on Pakistan front. Op Sindhu was new, but rest of neighborhood for last decade or so, we have been witnessing this trend that China is treating South Asia as their strategic periphery, where they will give no room to India. In fact, to the extent possible, they will seek to sort of cut down our role. I don't want to go into specifics of that, but returning to your question, what we need to do, since that's going to be a major preoccupation of my chair in STEAM, I think we really need to revisit our neighborhood policy in many areas. Pakistan is a different category. China, we already talked about, both our neighbors. But other countries, we need to take a long-term view. We need to create mutual stakes. Even Bangladesh. Yes, we are faced with a problem, no doubt about it. But need to differentiate between regime of the day and people of Bangladesh. Avoiding sending negative signals which will sour sentiments on longer term, like what happened in Nepal, for instance, 2015. You'll recall, our position on question of
blockade,
promulgation of new constitution, perceived blockade. It created long-term problem. So we need to show great sensitivity dealing with these countries, and I'm saying that from personal experience. I was High Commissioner in Sri Lanka. I was Deputy Chief of Mission in Nepal. Almost 8 years I spent in these two countries. They are willing to seek, common space. They realize that India is a very important factor for them. We are not fully leveraging advantages we have. Connectivity agenda, Nepal, you look at, all not natural flows are southwards, they're not northwards. We need to do more. I was talking to a Nepalese delegation 4 days ago, and the one point they made that earlier generation of leaders, they were mostly educated in India. At least they had strong bonds with India. But today they're not looking at India as a preferred destination for higher education. They don't have that kind of connectivity at the emotional level, educational level with India, which was there earlier. I think that needs to be overcome. And finally, our strength is the fact that Indian economy is doing reasonably well. We can afford to be more generous vis-a-vis our neighbors. We can afford to be non-reciprocal in our terms of economic engagement. What happens that perception on their side, there's so many non-tariff barriers, and partly that's
True.
correct.
Yeah.
So I think we need to move out to that in our own interest. And if we do that, we will see resonance from these countries, a mindset of trying to micromanage politics of these countries, not accepting that even the smallest country is agency today. I think so. There are areas. I'm not saying that our policy has not been successful, but there's need for recalibration. More needs to be done. And this is not just because of China. China complicates our life because they are larger than life-size presence in our neighborhood.
So finally, I come back to, the title of this podcast, which is The Long View. So what is the long view for India? You said, Indian economy is doing well. So at least on the economic front, the, ascendancy of India seems to be on a good track. But the space for, let's say, strategic maneuvering seems to have, curtailed quite a bit in the last year. So how does India continue on this path of strategic autonomy when, all the great powers, whether it is America or China, are saying that there is a price for this?
Here, if one could go back to Netaji's legacy, work of scholars like Professor Zakka Bose, they bring out this point that ability of Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose to look at the bigger picture, which is very adverse from our point of view, taking certain calls based on strategic considerations, seeking contradictions among imperial powers at that point of time, and most importantly, having a clear sense of our destiny, that we'll be a shaper for our future. Ahead of others, he recognized importance of Asia, that this is going to be primary theater for us. Today, I think, once again, we need to be prepared for long haul. There will be, challenges where we will not have immediate answers. It will be a mistake in our part to improvise. We'll have to stay close to certain, fundamental policy orientation we have. Strategic autonomy, for instance, I think that's remains very important. And most importantly, invest in our capabilities. Because why China today is being taken so seriously? Trump is negotiating seriously with only two countries, China and Russia. I'm not going to Russia, but in case of China, it's because China is in a position to hit back. They have leverage. They have shown their capability. If we wish to earn strategic respect, we need to have more capability, including areas we have disregarded. Technology, for instance. I was just reading 2 days ago a report, it's called Critical Technology Tracker, brought out by Australian Strategic Policy Institute. The latest report which has come out in December, out of 74 critical technologies they track, China is now leading in 66.
Wow.
USA is leading only in 8. We are, of course, not leading in any. It might be some exaggeration, but Xi Jinping is obsessed with technology. India, I feel our engagement with technology is underwhelming. I think that needs to change. And finally, the final point, most critical point, social cohesion. I think we need to ensure that, we don't give openings to others to create problems for us.
All right. We'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Ambassador Ashok Kantha. It was a pleasure speaking to you on this inaugural podcast of The Long View. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Zakka.